This is the Animateducated program here on YouTube, and today we have Nik Ranieri. So we're at the CTN Center Stage Gallery, which is the home base of CTN Expo. You can hear they're kind of moving things around, so that's what you're hearing in the background. So we're here with Nik Ranieri. Now, so you started off your career at, you went to Sheridan College, and then your first job was on something called the Raccoons.
Yeah, the Raccoons. It was basically my first job out of college, and it was pretty much the only game in town since I was from Canada. I had very few options, and that was the only one that was going on. It was in Ottawa, and I worked there. I worked there for about a year and a half or so. It was at a time when the industry was really low, especially in Canada.
Yeah.
During Sheridan College, a lot of the people in the other courses thought animation people were crazy because the industry was pretty much dead. And we even got told by the head of photography, for the head of the photography course, it's like, you guys are still dreaming about Snow White and it's all dead and you're not going to get any jobs and there's no work and blah blah blah. And all I kept thinking is, yeah, what about your graduates? They're gonna end up, taking pictures of kids on ponies. So don't talk to me about, opportunities. But anyway, so it was pretty bleak. And in fact, the people that graduated a couple of years before me in the animation, they were struggling. Some of them were driving cabs, and then this thing came up with Atkinson's doing the Raccoon series, and it was done in Canada. They wanted it Canadian content, and so they wanted it to be done in Canada. And so a lot of us just migrated up to Ottawa to work at that, and I went in. I showed my film, my student film, and I don't know, I think they had everybody cast or whatever, or they weren't impressed, or I don't know what, but they hired me as an assistant. And one of my big regrets is that I kind of had a chip on my shoulder, like I was better than everybody and all that, and it sort of came through in my work habits and things, and very little humility, and that sort of didn't bode well. I mean, in a way, it kind of pushed me to excel and step up the ladder and all that. And eventually, I did become an animator there, but personally, it wasn't a good. It was a regretful time. But you grow. Yeah. And you do things that you regret and all that, and it helped me.
Were you intimidated by any artists at Disney when you first got in, or?
I was intimidated by all of the artists when I got in. I still had a little bit of that attitude from my Atkinson's days when I got a job over at Roger Rabbit in England. And so I still really wanted to push, and I wanted to become an animator, and they weren't giving me the opportunity. They found out later it was because of a mix-up in my reels. They didn't see my later stuff. They saw my early stuff, and they said, oh, he's an assistant, I guess it's all TV stuff, because I took my portfolio and I put it in order, chronological order, instead of the way it should have been, which is best stuff first. And then there's a couple of times in that time working for, Richard Williams and things like that, where, you've taken down a couple of notches and realized there are extremely talented people out there, It was James Baxter's first job, and he really showed everybody what it was all about. I mean, he excelled from the moment, from the very first. Although I have to say, he did have one part. He was doing this shot of a weasel hanging or swinging off of a pile of bricks or something. and he didn't quite get it right.
Oh.
And Dick Williams basically sat down and just went through it and said, this is how you do it and all this. And he is feeling very demoralized, right?
Oh.
And I said afterwards, I said, hey, James, this happens to everyone, right? And he goes, this is never going to happen to me again.
Wow.
And then he went home, painted a pentagram on his floor. No. He went home. I mean, he from then on, he just made sure that he was that he did the best that he could, and he became one of the best animators I think I've ever met. And then I got an opportunity to go over and work on Roger Rabbit, which was a great thing. I from there transfer over to Disney. And I did in-betweens for the first couple of weeks on the pig head sequence that was cut. And then after that, they put me on with a guy who was doing the props, and I was his personal assistant, a guy named David Brown. And so I worked on his stuff, and he got a Baby Herman shot. And I didn't know this, but Baby Herman, the whole section with Baby Herman talking about, the murder and all that, that was all Dick Williams. He posed the whole thing out, and what he did is he gave the poses to training animators. It was like glorified assistant work. And their job was to take those poses and flesh them out and turn them into animation, and all that. So David ran down and grabbed, he says, do you still have your reel here? And I said, yeah, here. I gave it to him. About half an hour later, he comes back and he says, pack up your stuff. You're moving upstairs. You've just been promoted. Wow. And I didn't realize that, but they needed people desperately. I mean, there are people who wouldn't work with Dick in London and all that. And so they needed people. And so anybody that showed promise, they grabbed. And so, that was a good opportunity. And then the first thing they did was give me one of those Baby Herman shots, which I had no idea what was required of me.
Right.
So I just thought of these drawings as placements. I just didn't know that I was supposed to take those drawings that were Dick's and clean them up and then add to them. I just saw them as placeholders.
Oh, I see.
Like, this is the size of the character, and this is what he's holding.
This is like a layout drawing.
When he found out that I basically ignored all his drawings, he flipped out in the whole studio. Everybody's looking up, and it's like, you think you're just out of college, in my 35 years experience. Wow. I was like, wow. And so at that moment, I got befriended by Andreas and people like that who came around, so it's okay. And then I did more Baby Herman shots. Now that I knew what was going on, I did them the way I understood they were supposed to be done. And he really liked what I did. And so he gave me a bunch of stuff. And by the end of it, it was great. He was a champion for animators who are really gung-ho. And he liked my work. And we left on a good note. So it was great. It was a good experience. And then coming to Los Angeles and working with John Musker and Ron Clemens on Mermaid, that was an interesting experience. When I got there, I was, pretty high on the whole feature animation. It's great and all that. And then I got onto Mermaid, and I looked at the characters. I'm like, just anything but Ariel. Because I had no experience in drawing a character like that. Right. I was drawing rabbits. I did a couple of Jessica scenes, but she's pretty simple. Yeah. She's not like Ariel. Ariel is really complicated. Yeah. So they put me on the Ariel unit.
Of course, right.
I floundered on that thing. I went to Glenn and said, "Hey, hi, I'm trying to draw this," and he just, "Here you go." Yeah, that's great. Okay. I went to Mark Henn, and he did the same thing, and it's just like, I still don't know how to do that. I don't know. So I did what I could. I used the model sheet. It didn't work out very well. I said, "Could you?" So I talked to them a bit. I said, this isn't really working out. And they said, "How about we put you on Ursula?" Easier. Ursula's design, there's more anchor points. You get an idea. You can figure out the design and all that. But yeah, so my drawing ability wasn't the strongest. In my opinion, it still isn't. There are people who can really draw circles around me. But Ursula was a lot easier to handle. But I was still off model. I still struggled. I still got to the point where even at the end of the film, I barely got on the credits. I barely got 100 feet.
Wow.
You're supposed to get 100 feet or over to get on the credits. That was the old rules, right? Oh. So yeah, I barely got on the mermaid list. And in fact, there's a couple of us who were going to be let go. Ooh. They were going to let go of us because we weren't working out and all that, and I was on that list. Yeah. But then they needed people to get, to do rescuers, so they didn't want to lose anybody. Yeah. So they put me on rescuers, and everybody they didn't like, they put on a character called the Dr. Mouse, which had like 35 feet total and about 7 animators who were assigned to it. Oh, wow. So we each get 5 feet and it's done. Yeah. So that was kind of and then that went through a process of story problems, and they sort of didn't know what to do with it, and they back in story, out of story, and all that. In the meantime, they said, "Why don't you go and work on this thing called Cranium Command? It's a thing for Epcot." And I said, "Sure, okay, Cranium Command." I went over there. Rob Minkoff was directing. There was Tom Cito and Kevin Lima was an animator on it. Pete Docter was an animator on it. Dave Brooksima, a whole bunch of people were on the short. Yeah. And so we were all working. I went over and they gave me the final general knowledge, which is this big, massive sort of general character. Mm-hmm. And they gave me the last shot. It was like 40 feet. And so I worked hard at doing that. And based on that animation, I got promoted to head of character, or they asked me to work on Wilbur when they saw that animation from Cranium. Right. And that was directed by Kirk and Gary. And so Mike Gabriel and Hendel Butoy were on Rescuers. They liked that scene a lot, and they put me on Wilbur. Okay. And then, Yorn, who was the lead, sort of left for whatever reason, and they gave me the lead. So that's how I got a lead on Rescuers after I was about to get laid off. Right. This is circumstances and all that. Then you get to Beauty and the Beast, and of course Kirk and Gary started directing Beauty and the Beast, so they wanted me to work on Lumiere and this sort of snowballs, right? Right. Until Beauty and the Beast ended, and then Aladdin started, and the snowball hit. Oh. Right? Because Aladdin was directed by Musker and Clemens, right, who were about to fire me after the end of Mermaid. Oh, no. So again, it was like, Nick? Oh, that guy. Okay. Oh, no. So I didn't get anything for that. I sort of went on Jafar's unit with Andreas, and it wasn't until I worked on, it was at a party. It was Glenn Keane's sort of farewell party. He was going to go to France for a year or whatever. Right. And while I was there, John walked up and he said, "So I saw, Pocahontas, saw the stuff. So did you design Meeko?" And I said, "Yeah, pretty much." Did you, how much of it did you animate? I could say that I animated at least half of that character.
Who did the other half?
It was a combination. There were some other animators on it, but a lot of it was Brian Ferguson. Oh, okay. Did a great job. The stuff I couldn't handle, I gave to him. He was terrific. But yeah, once I talked to him about that, that's when he decided that he was going to, I was in his good graces. All of a sudden,
you proved yourself.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. So that was a good learning experience and all that. Eventually, they asked, "Do you want to do Hades?" Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah. Yes, so that was, and later on, it was funny. Eric said, "Man, I kind of am jealous. I wish I had stayed on the character." Oh no. Everybody brings their own sensibilities to it.
Right,
So
right.
definitely would have been different. But
Yeah.
Like when you are first handed, like say Kuzco or somebody, main character, what do you do? What's the first thing that you do to kind of get into that character or whatever?
assuming you have a really good design, you just start working with it, and you just start, doing tests and stuff. And that's usually what I do. I do tests with the characters, work it out, see how it looks, turning it around and all that. And usually what I like to do is find a piece of dialogue, something that's fun to do. You just don't want to pick a piece of dialogue and animate it if it doesn't say anything. I remember once a friend of mine, he was trying to get a job at Disney, and he wanted to do a thing of like do a Disney character, animate it to show that he can do it and all that. And he wanted to do Bagheera from Jungle Book, right? Dude, if you pick a line from Jungle Book, they're always going to connect it to that.
Yeah.
So no matter what you do, they're going to be comparing your work to Ollie Johnson.
Right.
What you need to do is find something that will make them laugh or make them respond. So at that time, there was this old album that came out called Golden Throats.
Oh, yeah. I remember Golden Throats.
Well, there's a couple of cuts of Sebastian Cabot doing line readings from Bob Dylan songs, right? I thought, take a line from that and animate Bagheera to it.
Oh, yeah.
It'd be great,
Yeah.
It's hilarious, right? I don't think he ever did it, but whatever. The fact is when I approach a character, I want to do something that will get people excited about the possibility of what this character could do, and so I try to pick a line that's not from the movies or something that's unusual if it's a known actor,
Right.
So do stuff like that. I will. And then, again, I won't try to do a model sheet until I've actually done some animation, because I find the best model sheets come from actual animation drawings.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense.
Because usually when you do model sheets, you're like sad, happy, but
Three-quarter.
and it's like, who cares about it? Nobody. I have two Hades model sheets at home. One that I did before animation, and the other I did after. And you always know the ones that are after, they're from something, so there's a reason for them. There's integrity to the drawing, whereas the others are just pretty much like screaming, sad, angry. They don't mean anything. They don't have any basis. So I always try to do tests first and figure out the character from that, and hopefully, get out all those bad interpretations of the character before it actually gets to production, because inevitably you always hate your first scenes. And you always think, I wish I could go back and redo that. Now that the picture's over, can I redo the first one, because it's really off model, I hate it and all that. So you always try to get that stuff out. It's the same sort of principle as what they tell kids. You've got 100,000 bad drawings in you, and the sooner you get rid of them, the better, right? So it's the same thing with animation. You got so basically that's what I did. I would do that and sort of mold the character and get people. Well, actually, I was going to say get people excited about it as far as my crew, but really don't have a crew at that point. You're just sort of figuring it out. I mean, Eric Goldberg is huge inspiration. All his tests are so amazing at the very beginning. He just he did a Lewis test, the alligator. He did the 2 genie tests. It pretty much sold the character. So I always look at that. I mean, my first Meeko test actually got into the film. It was something. I had him eating a cookie and picking up the crumbs, all that stuff. And so that test, they actually liked it, thought it was cute, and so they put it into the film. I adapted it a bit because they didn't use the entire scene, but that was a big accomplishment, because usually they just sort of write it off as like, it's a test, okay,
Next.
Trying to do something that will really solidify the character. That's next stage, and then just as far as working with the character, just trying to bring out the quality in the voice. What I like to do, especially if it's a well-known actor, I would take photos of the actor, give me expressions and all that, and I put the photos up on my wall, and
Right.
sort of inspire me in certain ways as far as drawing.
Did you look at video? I mean, this is
Yeah.
back
They
then.
they had video.
Back then, okay.
They filmed the actors, doing it. But again, the actors not really. They're vocally acting,
Right.
but
They're not performing.
right. So you're not gonna get a
Yeah.
lot of information. Maybe certain expressions and things like that come through naturally, but they're not on camera, so they're not giving it their all as far as visual goes, as far as the visual. So you only garner so much from that. Basically, I'd like to, you listen to the track, and it's what you see in your mind, because that's what, that's what's going to, what you want to show up. You want the best visual representation. So even if, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? Hey, I'm doing this. Hey. You're not just going to do facial, like you're going to go, hey, you're going to exaggerate it. You're going to, because that's what your eyes are expecting to see when you hear that.
Right.
So properly representing that. And then that's why I like to hear little clicks, little pops, little lick smacks or whatever, or things like that. It helps you develop those little idiosyncrasies that you can, any pauses are good. There's a scene in Hercules where he's like, you can take a day off, right? And I thought, he's talking to Hercules during the deal, and I thought, you can take a day off. You have an opportunity to do a pose, to do something, and you could say, can I extend that a little bit just to get that thing in there? And usually I'll do that. I'll cut it and trim it and manipulate it, and then I'll show it to them, and they'll go, this looks great. That's great. And it's like, well, I opened that up a bit. Okay, just a bit to sell that. Is that okay? I'll tell them, all right. Kingdom of the Sun.
Oh, right.
And which eventually became Emperor's New Groove and all that.
Yeah, you worked on that, yeah.
And that was probably the best time I've ever had on a film, I think. Hey, when I first saw what they were going for, I was like, yes, this is the type of film I've always wanted to work on.
Yeah.
I remember walking in, and they had early boards after the whole Kingdom of the Sun collapsed.
Yeah.
Mark Dindal and his team, include Chris Williams, and they started to come up with concepts, and I walked in and I saw a board where Izuma's walking down the hall and Kuzco's walking down the hall and some other guard is walking down the hall or something, and they each have their own theme music, and they stop in the middle and they're like, hey, you interrupted my theme music. No, you interrupted my theme music. And I just thought, okay, it wasn't that great an idea, but the concept of that type of bizarre sort of, I thought this could only get better. This is where I want. This is the type of stuff I always wanted to do. I love that stuff,
Oh yeah.
And so it just got better from there. And they said, we want you to do the lead, and I'm like, and I knew it would be a big job because it's the lead, which means both the human and the llama, and that would take a lot. And had the biggest crew I ever had, because I had two crews, one for the human and one for the llama, and I still managed to produce a good chunk of footage for each of those characters. And on Groove, there was a scene where it sounded like they used two different takes. Because he was going, still ugly llama face. And he says, well, what happened? He goes, I'm trying to figure that out, okay? So what you have is ugly llama face. I'm trying to figure that out, okay? And it's just like, it seemed like such a switch.
Yeah. Too fast.
Yeah, and so I thought, well, how about he's freaking out and he slaps himself. And so I said, this helps sell this because it's such a drastic change from one to another. So it's like I'm trying to figure that out. Okay, so it made sense to use that, right? Put that in. Same with the scene in Chicken Little where the father is like. He says one thing and then he says completely the opposite. He's driving in the car and he says, well, why baseball, son? Why? And then, Chicken Little says, I think it would have been great. Yeah, I think it's going to be great. And then he goes, baseball, huh? That's great. And I'm thinking, what?
Yeah.
The two didn't sort of connect. So what I did is I thought, well, during that time when Chicken Little's talking, maybe he can start to think. So visually on his face, I'm like, baseball. You're trying to get sort of like, well, maybe I'm not positive. Maybe I should be positive. So, okay. So you try to create a visual segue from one to the other that didn't, so there's things like that.
I mean, I wish I had a video of you just doing that one line there, because you really acted a lot facially and, physically just now. We can't see it, we can actually hear it, so you could see that. But that's one thing when teaching animation, is trying to teach the kids of today that it's not all just sit down in a computer and push buttons and move mouses, but you got to really get the character inside you and just kind of act it out, kind of thing. And if it's in front of a mirror or your cell phone or something, so you can see, experiment with the character or whatever. Did you do anything like that now, where you like record yourself or something or anything, or did you just know?
Every now and then you do live action reference, but it was mostly for action, never for facial stuff. I don't know. Just before I left Disney, I was in the training department, and there were kids out of college, or in college or whatever. They were filming themselves, and I remember walking by with their desks, and their face was on one monitor and the animation was on the other, and they had a face cam on it. It was CGI, right?
Right.
And they were running at the same time, and it was basically verbatim. They just copied what they did and all that, and I just thought, is that what they want me to do? They want me to take somebody's performance and just copy it? And I don't know. It sort of takes the imagination out. I don't know. It just seems so clinical. Like step one, copy, paste, copy.
I would see it as more of just a reference,
get an idea of the timing, maybe.
Well, reference. That's why I used to shoot live action of it. So, the last live action thing I think I remember shooting was for Chicken Little. It was he had Chicken Little on his shoulder and he was doing a little jig, and I needed to figure out how to do that. So I shot, footage of myself doing that, and then I was able to use that as a reference. But not much else, really. I don't know. Sometimes they'd shoot live action reference for like the main characters, Aladdin and Jasmine and Aladdin. And, I mean, I stood in for the live action for Jafar, but no one ever used it. I was just there so that the actors who played Jasmine and Aladdin could play off of somebody.
I see. Yeah.
So I got to do that. That was the best part about working on Aladdin for me was those live action shoots.
That's fun.
I did the same thing for Hades as well, even though I never used, but the Meg and the Herc actors, they were the ones, I think they did the same thing on Princess and the Frog too. John and Ron like to do that stuff. They I guess they get ideas when they shoot live action, and it helps them and all that. So kind of old school, just to sit down and look in a mirror, do a drawing, get an expression, work in it, work out of it, work out your mechanics and all that, and it's animation. I mean, hyper-realism is not the job of animation, you know. And so there's things that, there's good and bad parts. When I worked in CG, the best part was the fact that you could, down to the pixel, you could work out eye darts and movements that would be impossible in 2D.
Right.
And 2D is more of a broad stroke, whereas, CGI is like pointillism, and you could tweak that thing forever, and it's... And there was a satisfaction in that, and a lot of the stuff I did I really feel good about. But again, I started to work on an American Dog, or no, what was it called? Bolt.
Bolt.
American Dog. There's that game. Well, it used to be American Dog,
Yeah.
then it turned into Bolt.
Oh, okay.
But I don't know. Once Ron and John said, "Hey, do you want to come back and do 2D? You want to do Charlotte?" And it's like all I could think about was that, and I just quickly finished off the scene I was doing on Bolt and said and bolted,
Yeah.
and then I never looked back. And I remember when the whole firing happened when they let everyone go. That was 2D.
Yeah.
John and Ron said, "Hey, we feel guilty," and it's like, guys, you have nothing to feel guilty about. It was a great decision. I really liked working on Charlotte. That was one of my favorite characters I've ever worked on. It was a chance to do a female character, which I'd never done. I mean,
bucket list.
I did.
Yeah.
I did some aerial shots. I did some,
Ursula.
Jessica, Ursula, and things like that. But I never led a female character, and that was the first one. And so that was one of the best times I ever had working on that film. That character, even though, she's not really, she wasn't hyped because there was a problem. They didn't want to hype her because Tiana was a star.
Right.
And so they intentionally held back on the promotion of Charlotte.
Oh.
Too much, in my opinion. I mean, when a play set doesn't even have Charlotte in it, come on. I mean, she's still a character in the film. Big Daddy is still a character in the film. They had Lawrence in one of them. Lawrence. I mean, they didn't have Charlotte, but they had Lawrence. Give me a break.
Yeah.
All that. The experience of working on her was amazing, and it was a nice sort of send off. I was glad I got to do that character before the whole thing collapsed. And people say, "Oh, well, you never know in the future." It's like, I don't know. We'll see. By the time somebody does a 2D film that's successful, I could be, pretty much 1 foot in the grave. One of the great things about my time at Disney was that everything I did is stuff that I've always wanted to do. Like, do a funny sidekick, right? But then it's like, I've always wanted to do a villain.
Right.
So I got to do a villain. But I got to do a funny villain.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. I always wanted to do a lead role. But I never wanted to do an Aladdin or a Belle or anything like that. But I got the lead, but it was a funny lead.
Right. Very stylized.
I always wanted to do a pretty girl, but I never wanted to do a Jasmine or a Belle or an Ariel. I got to do Charlotte, which is a, sexy female character, but she's funny, So everything is all humor. I always wanted to do funny stuff. That's the type of stuff I always wanted to do. So I got to do aspects of those things that I've always wanted to do before, but with a comedy bent to it. And to me, that was the best of both worlds.
So is there any advice you'd give to like students of today, like, about animation, or if they're like, I want to be an animator, or I want to be a background artist, or I want to work in this industry?
Be versatile. Focusing on one thing, doing it well, you may find out that one thing goes away. So you want to, at least have a couple of eggs in your basket, right? Work on anything to start out. Build a reputation. Whatever you do it to the best of your ability, even if you think it's stupid, even if you think it's crap. It doesn't matter, because you didn't write it.
Right.
It's the visuals that people are going to look at, and they go, "Oh, that was well done. These jokes are corny, but you did a good job on that." Whatever, do it to the best of your ability, and strive to always keep improving. Learn from others. Don't think you know everything. That helps you progress.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
It like turns
And that's
itself
it.
up.
Bling, the more you know. But thank you, Jim.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thanks for coming on and telling us all about his life and animation and what he's been doing. You can check out his Facebook page under Nik Ranieri Animator to learn more about his work. His Special thanks to Tina Price and the CTN Studios for allowing us to record there. Please subscribe to Animated Educated. You can also visit our Animated Educated blog at animatededucated.blogspot.com.